welcome to our committee hearing. It's a joint committee hearing of the House Committee on Water and Land, House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, and the Committee on Finance. This triple joint committee hearing is for the purposes of hearing one bill, House Bill 2024, relating to Mauna Kea. It offers an alternative management framework for Mauna Kea as implementation of recommendations from the Mauna Kea Working Group, which was formed based on a House resolution we passed in the 2021 session. Welcome to all the members and welcome to the testifiers to today's hearing. We had the hearing, we scheduled it on Saturdays so that we could make it as convenient as possible for people who have to work during the week in other jobs, and so this was an opportunity to hear from the public. We really want to try to facilitate public input into this important decision. I'd like to provide just a few ground rules as we move forward. I would request that the testifiers limit their testimony to a couple of minutes. After 2 minutes or so, I'll ask you to summarize so we can make sure we have enough time to hear from all testifiers today. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while you're waiting to testify. And then when I call your name, please turn your video on, unmute yourself, provide your testimony. When your testimony is finished, then if you could turn off your video and mute yourself as well. That way we don't get any feedback or any disruptions. If you have technical issues, use the chat function to contact our technical staff, and that they can assist you if it's on our end. If you're disconnected during testimony, just rejoin. I'll try to make time for you to continue your testimony when you come back in. If the network fails for whatever reason and we need to reschedule, we will certainly post public notice when our meeting and our hearing is rescheduled. And please, if I could ask everyone to conduct themselves with aloha and courtesy for each other, we'll be just fine. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and begin our testimony. We've received a lot of written testimony on this measure. All the members have received the testimony, the written testimony, so they have it and they have time to read it. Today, we have some people who have indicated they are going to provide testimony via video conference, and so we'll begin that process right now. First up, we have the Attorney General. Linda Chow, please proceed.
Good morning. Deputy Attorney General Linda Chow. Good morning, Chairs Tarnes, Nakashima, and Luke, and members of the committee. The Department of the Attorney General has provided written comments to the bill, and the written comments are really more to address technical issues with the bill that would basically make the transition or make the bill more effective upon being passed. I'm available for questions, and that's my testimony.
Thank you very much, Deputy Attorney General. Appreciate that. Next, we have the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Chair Case, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Chair Luke, Chair Nakashima, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Suzanne Case, on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. You have our written testimony. We respectfully oppose the bill. We do thank the working group for a tremendous amount of work this year, working together, obviously very deeply engaged with discussions about perspectives of Mauna Kea, and obviously this is very well intentioned, but we do think that we do oppose the bill. DLNR is, as you no doubt know, deeply engaged with management on the mountain, and we operate as the landlord, the conservation district use permit regulator. We do forestry and wildlife. We do cooperative enforcement. We do work on historic sites and burials cooperatively with community members. And I will say that as far as management goes, the management of those natural and cultural resources and the requirements of the permit conditions are very, very well managed. So there is I think people use the word management differently, but if you go through all of the reviews, we get annual reviews at the land board on management. We have been engaged throughout the years on audit responses and are pretty well addressed the audit issues. Last year, we did an independent assessment of management on the mountain that concluded the natural and cultural resources are very well managed, and the permit conditions are being followed. Great work on invasive species and trash and public safety. So again, people use the word management differently, and they often use it as more of a overall policy or politics. And certainly there are broader cultural issues embedded in this work on Mauna Kea, along with astronomy. But as far as the management goes, there is a strong management framework in place, and we believe it should continue. Thank you very much. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Chair Case. I appreciate that. And members, I do refer you to her written testimony, which goes through at length many of the points that are relevant to our discussion. Next, we have the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Sylvia Hussey, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Bronco, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, Chair Luke, as well as Vice Chair Yamashita. We are grateful that OHA was able to participate in the working group, as well as provide comments. And we stand on our testimony that has been provided of comments on 3 primary points: that the Board of Trustees has the ultimate authority in governance regarding any kind of authority. Second, we have concerns about the administrative attachment to BLNR based on historical action and inaction of the BLNR as well as the department. And then third, we offer suggestions of consideration that OHA be considered a collaborative steward with the Lahui and the state in being able to effective governance there on the Mauna. And so we offer those comments at this time. Thank you, chairs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussey, and thank you for your participation in the Mauna Kea Working Group. Members, next we have Kamehameha Schools. Kaeo Duarte, please proceed.
Aloha, Kaeo Duarte, Vice President of Community Aina Resiliency, testifying on behalf of Kamehameha Schools. Aloha ina luna ho malu Luke, Tarnas, Nakashima, na hope luna ho malu Branko, Matayoshi, Alala o na Kumike. A year ago, House Resolution 33 established the Mauna Kea Working Group to develop recommendations for a new governance and management structure for Mauna Kea that collaboratively engages with all stakeholders, particularly the Native Hawaiian community. With diverse viewpoints represented, the process proved to be balanced while demanding. We applaud the efforts of the working group to have the necessary courageous conversations, and we recognize their report and recommendations as a milestone to address past management issues and Pono stewardship of Mauna Kea going forward. Alaila, a new Mauna Kea Stewardship Authority is an appropriate next step, creating a venue for diverse expertise, perspectives, and community voices are meaningfully elevated in the decision-making process, and one that we urge places Mauna Kea at the head of the table. While no process is perfect, we have faith and trust that the leaders in our community will rise to carry this kuleana with the same aloha and know that underlie the working group's recommendations. We urge that spirit of huipu to continue through formation of the Mauna Kea Stewardship Authority and implementation of the working group's other recommendations. For these reasons, we strongly urge that you support HB 2024. Mahalo.
Thank you, Kaeo. Appreciate the reminder that the Mauna is really at the head of the table. Next, we will hear from the Hawaiian Civic Club of Hilo, Dr. Noe Wong Wilson. Dr. Wilson, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, sorry, just having a little technical issue. Let me also,
You can proceed without your video on if that's easier for your bandwidth capacity. That's fine. Please proceed. We hear you.
okay. Thank you. I think I'm on. So yes, aloha, good morning, chairs and committee members, and thank you for all being here and those of you in the public who are here this Saturday morning to hear this very important bill. I have submitted written testimony. I won't go through the whole testimony, but I will say I was a member of the Mauna Kea Working Group, and I want to very much urge this body to pass this bill through with the amendments that are in my testimony. So there are 3 points, I believe, in my testimony that I would like to make to request an amendment to add into the bill. And one is, the first is the kanawai, which are in the report that we provided. The 4 particular kanawai that are at the beginning of the Mauna Kea Working Group report, which should be included in the bill itself. Also, I'm sorry, the second issue is the name Mauna Kea. So in the working committee bill, we did make a request for Mauna Awa Kea to be recognized as a nomenclature, official nomenclature for this Mauna, and stated our reasons for that. I'm sorry, I'm not able to actually see my testimony right now, but there is also an issue which I want to bring up, which is not in my testimony, and that is relating to language of similar to that which is in Chapter 171, which governs DLNR. There are specific language which should mirror some of the content of that chapter and be inserted into the bill. It was in our intention, I believe, in the working group report that some of those important features which are currently provided by the department would transfer into the bill. And so I would request that we be allowed to provide some further late testimony which might address some of those issues directly. And I will be here for any questions that may come up, but I also want to make one more statement, and I think there's a lot of misinformation that's been circulated amongst the community. And unfortunately, the timing of the session dictates, how much time we have in the community to discuss and to review such a large piece of legislation. And that is totally understandable. But it is very intently stated in the working group committee as well as in the bill that this new entity will not take the public, the lands deeded for, or the lands determined to be in this jurisdictional area to be removed from the public land trust. It does not take anything out of the public land trust nor affect the public land trust in any way. So I just wanted to make that clarity to make sure everybody understood that. And so I'm going to be here for more questions if anyone has any. But mahalo and thank you very much for being here today.
Mahalo, Dr. Wong Wilson. And yes, please do provide some follow-up written testimony regarding Chapter 171 amendment or suggestions that you have. Just send that in, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your participation in the Mauna Kea Working Group.
Thank you. Can I just lastly add that, it was a lot of effort, a lot of work. 15 of us who sat at the table. We didn't all come from the same framework or the same thought process when we began, but we were able to work very closely together with respect and aloha for each other. And knowing that I think in the end, we're all trying to do the best that we believe we can for the Mauna. And we appreciate that.
Mahalo. I appreciate you providing that context of the work that we did on the Mauna Kea Working Group.
Yeah,
okay, let's move on. Next, we have the University of Hawaii. Mr. Greg Chun, please proceed.
Hello, Mike Kako, Chairs Tarnas, Nakashima, Luke, Vice Chairs Branco, Matayoshi, and Yamashita, and members of the committees. Mahalo for the opportunity to comment on HB 2024. My name is Greg Chun, and I'm here on behalf of the University of Hawaii. The university is committed to the comprehensive and holistic principles for Mauna Kea stewardship advocated in the Mauna Kea Working Group report and as called for in HB 2024. However, the university respectfully opposes HB 2024 for multiple reasons in the testimony that we have submitted to all of you. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight a few of the more salient issues outlined in those comments. Astronomy on Mauna Kea is a longstanding state policy. HB 2024 creates a new entity with the authority to, among other things, establish a plan to return the Mauna above the 9,200 foot elevation to its natural state. Mauna Kea is truly deserving of the highest levels of stewardship. Decisions on access to Mauna Kea for culture, science, education, recreation, and commercial activities require a much broader policy discussion involving stakeholders across multiple communities and policymakers on Hawaii Island and the state. No single state entity should have the sole authority to make that policy decision on behalf of the state. Second issue I'd like to highlight is that we do believe the complexities and costs of managing access to public lands have been underestimated in the report. Access to Mauna Kea by Hawaii Island residents, including Native Hawaiian practitioners, is one of the most contentious and consistently raised concerns in matters related to Mauna Kea. The report underestimates the complexity of addressing those public interests and coordinating across various jurisdictions on Mauna Kea. There are various entities that have different jurisdiction for the lands of Mauna Kea. Further, the proposal to include state lands, adjacent state lands and private lands into the jurisdiction greatly exacerbates the complexities of the enterprise and significantly increases its resource requirements. Lastly, there are a number of legal and administrative and funding issues present that present risks for implementation of the proposal. These are outlined in our comments. These include, but are not limited to, potential constitutional concerns related to race-based membership of a government entity with control over state lands and resources. The report does not account for the complexity of the various existing jurisdictions on Mauna Kea and the variety of funding sources that will need to be shored up or replaced with general funds. And the lack of key stakeholder representation on the board, i.e. astronomy, UH, and even the federal partners, will in and of itself create governance and funding problems. All of these are complex issues, and any one of them could significantly impede implementation. Respectfully, attaching the success of a newly established entity to highly speculative outcomes is irresponsible without considerably more cost-benefit analysis than is provided in the report and to substantiate HB 2024. In closing, the university should be judged by our complete record, which shows substantial improvement over time across multiple dimensions. Our commitment has been reliably demonstrated in time, effort, and resources committed by us over the years in the exercise of our stewardship responsibilities for the privilege of access we have. And as a result, as reported in the DLNR's own independent evaluation, the cultural and natural resources on state conservation lands on Mauna Kea are some of the best managed and protected lands in the entire state. And we have a world-class research enterprise Hawaii can be proud of. Mahalo for the opportunity to provide our testimony. We'll be available for questions.
Mahalo, Dr. Chun. And I refer members to the university's written testimony. It is comprehensive and very important information for all of us to consider. Members, I'd like to go back to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. I understand Trustee Dan Ahuna is with us and wanted to make a statement and provide testimony. Trustee Ahuna, please proceed.
Mahalo and thank you, chairs of the joint committees, members, thank you so much for having me. My name is Dan Ahuna, and I represent the islands of Kauai and Niihau, trustee of the board. I'm just here to stand on our testimony, OA's testimony, and I just wanted to come and just give our support. So thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you, trustee. Appreciate those words of support. Okay, members, we're going to go next to Mauna Kea observatories. Dr. Hilton Lewis, please proceed.
Aloha Chairs Tarnis, Nakashima, Luke, and Vice Chairs and committee members. My name is Hilton Lewis. I'm the director of the Keck Observatory here on behalf of the Mauna Kea Observatories to provide comments on HB 2024. Mahalo nui loa for this opportunity. The benefits of astronomy in terms of new knowledge for all humanity, as well as the economic, workforce, educational, and community benefits in Hawaii, continue to be very significant and worth pursuing for future generations. But a number of factors have come together that give us an opportunity to change how we care for Mauna Kea and how we conduct astronomy for the better as we move forward. There are multiple pathways, whether it's through UH governance and management or by shifting to a new governance and management model as HB 2024 proposes. We seek, as Mauna Kea Observatories, to be helpful collaborators in this process, no matter which path you choose. We have input, which is born from our extensive experience, and we hope you'll consider this as you weigh the paths forward. So first, if there's going to be a change to a new entity, there really needs to be enough time to have a workable transition. From our perspective, 3 years to stand up a new entity is simply not enough. I believe you need at least 5 years. And it cannot be underestimated how complex the stewardship of Mauna Kea is. Second, there's tremendous time pressure coming from the looming end date of the current lease. And if the legislature approves a new entity, we urge you to also find a way to relieve this time pressure to provide for a reasonable transition without triggering decommissioning, which would be on the table for all the telescopes without the land authorization question settled. So if not, I think astronomy's future could be threatened, and so would the positive contributions that it makes to Hawaii. So no matter the path forward, I want to just share 3 points. On the Mauna Kea Observatories, we'll pay our share of the management costs, period. We just need that this be fair, it's feasible, and sustainable. Secondly, we believe that astronomy should be involved in the decision-making to assure the strategic decisions on the collective best interests of all. In the case of HB 2024, we strongly urge that an astronomy representative be added to the board. And the third, we also firmly believe there should be Native Hawaiian and community representation in governance and management, which will also help assure decisions are balanced and in the collective best interests of all. So with that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I refer you to our written testimony, and I am available to answer questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. And again, members, I refer you to the written testimony from Mauna Kea Observatories for more details. Next, we have Representative Hawaiian Eyes Tour, Shoyo Tsukamoto. Is Shoyo Tsukamoto with us? If not, please refer to the written testimony from Hawaiian Eyes Tour. Next, the Kona Kohala Chamber of Commerce. Yes, Ms. Wendy Laros, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Chair Nakashima, Chair Luke, and the members of the committees. With 430 member businesses and organizations, the Kona Kohala Chamber of Commerce strives to enhance the quality of life for our community through a strong, sustainable economy here on Hawaii Island. The Kona Kohala Chamber strongly supports astronomy on Mauna Kea, noting significant scientific discovery, global leadership, educational outreach, workforce pipelines, jobs, and economic impact. We believe the University of Hawaii is by far the best option for a management structure on Mauna Kea, and the lease renewal of 2033, as mentioned, is an urgent matter. We support the recently approved master plan and the for UH Mauna Kea lands, along with the comprehensive management plan. UH understands that it must protect Mauna Kea's value as a culturally significant landscape, as well as a premier location for astronomy. With entities in place such as the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship, Imiloa Astronomy Center, and the Institute for Astronomy, the University of Hawaii has broad resources, vast knowledge, and a steadfast commitment to provide the best possible management under very complex circumstances. We recognize the cultural expertise and thoughtful presentation of the Mauna Kea Working Group report that was provided for this bill, that formed the basis of House Bill 2024. However, Kona Kohala Chamber opposes the bill. Despite our objection, we thank all those who participated in the working group. Many aspects of HB 2024 don't align with our positions, and this includes establishing the Mauna Kea Stewardship Authority as the sole authority for the management of state-managed lands on Mauna Kea, voiding all rules pertaining to the Mauna Kea lands established by the University of Hawaii, establishing a plan to return the Mauna above 9,200 feet to its natural state, and prohibiting commercial use and activities above Halepohaku, and adopt rules to designate areas for permissible use. Those are all things that we are opposed to. We respectfully ask legislators to please consider the immense impacts of HB 2024 and oppose this measure at this time. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Leros. Appreciate your testimony. Next, we will hear from Kahea, Shelley Muneoka. Do we have a representative from Kahea with us today? If not, members, I refer you to written testimony from the organization. Next, we have a representative from Hawaii Forest and Trail, Ms. Cindy Pacheco. Please proceed.
Thank you, Representative Tarnas and the Chair Nakashima and Lewis. Please accept this testimony in opposition to HB 2024, establishing the Mauna Kea Stewardship Authority. My name is Cindy Pacheco, and I'm the Vice President and owner of Hawaii Forest and Trail. I have lived in Kona, where I raised my children and grandchildren for 45 years. I'm proud to have founded a business with my husband that puts our 54 employees first and continues our give back programs to our island community in meaningful and valuable ways. For nearly 25 years, we have operated guided nature tours on Mauna Kea, and as such, understand the great responsibility that comes with that endeavor. We honor the systems that are in place to protect this fragile ecosystem and place of cultural significance. And there are systems in place for commercial operators on the mountain. We understand that we are visitors to the mountain and appreciate that the lessons of the land continue to unfold to each time we traverse its slopes. We are respectful, our guests are managed and never away from our interpretive guides. The two places on the mountain that we access next to the telescopes for 30 to 45 minutes during sunset and by the visitor center for an hour during stargazing are the only areas we go to on the mountain. All 8 operators abide by the same rules that allow us to travel safely and within the confines of a very limited area. Our 29-year-old business has rebounded from many outside events, mostly recently the 2008 volcano disruption, the 2019 Mauna Kea closure, and the 2020 pandemic shutdown. Through each challenge, we have learned to navigate the rough waters to rebuild. However, the last few years combined have taken its toll, and our revenue and staffing is half of what it was prior to 2020 closure. These constant uncertainties do not allow for long-term planning or investing, which any healthy business needs to maintain and grow. Throwing up another blockade like prohibiting commercial use on Mauna Kea will only exacerbate already challenging times for the hundreds of families employed by the 8 companies on the mountain. Not only is this bill extremely divisive, there has been no research done to understand the economic consequences of these draconian measures. These consequences are very real and affect the ability of the people the bill proposes to help by taking away their employment and disrupting their lives, causing yet another movement of Hawaiians off the islands to find better living conditions. In its call for a new government, governance, and management structure for Mauna Kea that collaboratively engages all stakeholders. House Bill 2024 demonstrates a complete lack of collaborative effort and dismisses an entire working group of stakeholders who represent hundreds of people who have funded several key functions on the mountain, including the Ranger Program, environmental monitoring, and support services at the Visitor Information Center. This bill does not help Hawaiian people and must not pass. Mahalo for your consideration.
Thank you, Cindy Pacheco, for those words, and I refer members to the written testimony as well. Next, we have Lori Collins from Kundalini of Kona. Please proceed.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am a small business owner on the Big Island. My husband and I have a farm, and we support our business through catering services, one line of business, with companies like Hawaii Forest and Trail. My concern with this bill in question here today has to do with the impact that many businesses have by eliminating the commercial use of vendors to Mauna Kea. In addition to tour companies like Hawaii Forest and Trail, small businesses like myself are put in jeopardy. 2020 was an incredibly difficult year. We faced zero farm income because macadamia nuts weren't being purchased. We saw friends lose their restaurants, their mobile businesses for food. So sustaining a livelihood in Hawaii, on the Big Island in particular, has become more and more challenging. And my fear is just this lack of hope that people are beginning to feel because our opportunities keep diminishing. With a bill like HB 2024, I think we continue to promote that feeling of no hope. Here's yet another business, a line of business that would be going away. And it's not just companies like me. I use Honanau Market, a local vendor that supplies produce. I use Christine's Deli as a commercial kitchen. And there's other businesses like Hawaii Forest and Trail that are using small, locally operated vendors like myself. And without a commercial use, we have one avenue of tourism and revenue that again is eliminated. And that's my primary concern. But I also want to just share that companies like Hawaii Forest and Trail and other tour companies are very environmentally conscious about how the land is used, about how visitors to Mauna Kea behave themselves. Even things like using only reusable thermoses for meals that are taken up so that we're not producing waste for our island. Those are things that tour companies are thinking through, and they're managing with visitors to Mauna Kea. So I think there's an opportunity to actually improve the experience of visitors, the cultural knowledge that they gain in visiting a site like Mauna Kea, and of protecting the land. And I think HB 2024 is not helping to balance that experience with culture and protecting the land and the financial stability of our island. And for that reason, I am opposing the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the perspective of some of the commercial users that you provided us, as well as Hawaii Forest and Trail from their testimony. Members, next we'll move on to Save Our Sherwoods, the organization. Do we have Kuike Kamakea Ohelo with us today? Perhaps not. Members, I refer you to written testimony from the organization. Next, we have numerous individuals who have indicated they're going to present testimony today. First is Bronson Azama. Please proceed.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Yes. So I know on my written it was in opposition after listening to some of the discussion, and I think standing on Kahea, I'll stand on my opposition on the understanding of what Kahea has written in their written testimony, I feel like those changes need to be made. I don't trust the governor to appoint our practitioners. I think there are better avenues in which can be decided of which practitioners stand on this authority that you folks are proposing to create. I know the ahamokus, they're able to choose their po'o. I think that'll be something that might want to be looked at, where we find avenues where the cultural practitioners decide who represents ourselves rather than going through a governor appointed process. And then I'd also like to see the Kumu Kanawai incorporated, which I believe is also in Auntie Noinoi Wilson's testimony as well. So those are some things that might switch me to support. But for now, I'll just stand in opposition until those changes are made. And the other thing too, concerning a lot of the commercial use, I think for me, the practitioner aspect, and even for us, intimately tied with our religious aspect, definitely comes first. I don't see a whole same level of respect every time I visited the mountain, and I don't go to the top. I stay usually on the bottom part out of respect of also our own traditions. And I don't see all the time with commercial use and even the tourists that visit the level of respect that's articulated and care. But that's just my own personal observations. And that's all I'd like to say. Again, mahalo nui for pushing forth this bill and just allowing us community to have these broader discussions. Mahalo.
Thank you, Mr. Azama. Appreciate that. Next, we have testimony from Patty Cook. Is Miss Patty Cook with us today? Yes, please proceed. Please proceed. Good to see you.
Second to get logged in. Thank you. I appreciate that you're doing this on a Saturday, Rep. Tarnas and Luke and Nakashima, so that people like us who do work can actually participate. I was born and raised on Oahu, but have lived here 32 years. I'm speaking as an individual, but I do work at a Hawaiian-focused public charter school where almost 60% of our children are Native Hawaiian, and feel very strongly that these children's future is in jeopardy, and this bill does not help. My testimony was submitted. I oppose the bill. I'm horrified by a number of aspects of the bill, not the least of which the governing entity would be race-based and excludes the astronomy community from the process. I really urge that this bill be deferred, but I don't think your job is done. The grievances that the Native Hawaiian community have are legitimate. They're ignored. They've been ignored too long. I do point the finger at ourselves as well as the legislature. We do need to do things like help HL do its job. They need land, they need money. We need to be able to increase the minimum wage, and we can't wait till 2030. We do need to address poverty. We need to address access to healthcare. There are issues that need attention. This bill does not help with that. It only further divides the community. I thank you for your time. I do please urge that you defer the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty Cook. I very much appreciate your perspective on this. Next, we have Daviana McGregor. Daviana McGregor has indicated she would be here today, but I don't see her. Members, I refer you to her testimony in support in writing. Next, Dr. Pualani Kanahele. Is Dr. Kanahele, aloha, please proceed.
Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Kumu Kanawai, because that was missing from the write-up. And the Kumu Kanawai was something that was very foundational for the write-up that was done. And the Kumu Kanawai helps us to understand the relationship that we should be having with the environment that we don't have. And one of the Kumu Kanawai is the editor of Continuum. And we live on a volcanic island. We should understand the idea of volcanoes continuing, the ideas of water basins flowing, the ideas of the island continuing to shape and to form itself. Another Kumu Kanawai is the Kua'a Kanawai. The Kua'a Kanawai is gestating those spaces within our islands that is going through the period of remaking themselves or regenerating themselves such as the craters, such as the marshes that we have, such as the coral heads that go through the periods of gestation for themselves. And the other Kumu Kanawai is the Kaiokia Kanawai. The Kaiokia Kanawai is the natural boundaries that we have both vertically and horizontally that our kupunas set up for us, so we would understand this environment that we live in. Our problem is we don't understand the environment. We only understand that we're supposed to build our houses and live in our houses, but we don't walk outside to look at what actually is out there, what is supporting us. We live on an island, for goodness sakes. We live on an island, therefore, we should act like we know something about the island instead of just going out and enjoying the sun, or we should know what the sun does for our island. We should know what the ocean does for our island. We should know what the forest does for our island. And the Kihoihoi Kanawai, which is the last Kanawai, is a Kanawai of regeneration. And this Kanawai of regeneration helps us to understand that when we have an eruption, the land will fix itself automatically. When we have a flood, the land will fix itself. And so if we understand something about our land, and if we don't, we should understand what the Kanawais are all about. Mauna Kea is very much part of this set of Kanawais. Mauna Kea is a foundation for us, and it was thought of as by our kupunas as what we call an umewai, or a thing that collects water. And if we know anything about Mauna Kea, and we've seen maps of Mauna Kea from DLNR, and how much water it intakes and how much water it lets go into the different parts of our island. And again, we live on an island, we need the water source. Mauna Kea is part of that water source. And for those who know something about the culture, Mauna Kea is one of the akua. And when we talk about akua, we're not basically talking about gods like people understand gods to be. We're talking about the backbone of our life, those things that give us life. And Mauna Kea is one of them. And so the idea of eroding the mountain from the top down by beginning to build on the top of the mountain, to me, is against all of this Kanawais, against all of these ideas of preserving mountains or preserving islands. Okay. And so understand what your island is about. Understand what the mountain does for us and for our life cycles. And so that's all I have to say. And so I wanted the Kanawais to be reinstated. They somehow took it out, and I wanted it to be reinstated. And there's other things that took out that should be reinstated. And so people don't understand what the bill is about. I'm sorry.
Mahalo, Dr. Kanahele. I appreciate that. A reminder to reinsert the Kumu Kanawai into the actual legislation itself. I appreciate that. And I refer members to written testimony as well for more details on those 4 Kumu Kanawai that Dr. Kanahele just described. Thank you. Next, let's move on to Jason Cohn. Is Jason Cohn with us today? He had indicated he was going to provide testimony.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, Jason. Yes, you're there. Please proceed. Yes.
Hi, thanks. Okay. I'd like to please accept this testimony in opposition to HB 2024. My name is Jason Cohn. I'm president of Hawaii Forest and Trail. I was born in Kona and graduated from Kalakaua High School. I'm lucky to be a second generation of leadership in my family's business. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that every one of our employees is able to make a living wage while being able to provide the community opportunities to give back to their community, to the land, through the work we do with in our organization and the organizations we support. As a tour operator on Mauna Kea, we understand that our presence on the mountain is a privilege. And it's important for us to use that privilege to provide as many positive outcomes for the community and the mountain as possible. Because of the 6-month closure of the Mauna Kea Summit Access Road in 2019, we have a very good understanding of how the marketplace would react to a loss of commercial activity above the Mauna Kea Visitors Center and how this would affect our company. Should commercial operations cease on Mauna Kea, the following actions would take place within our company. We would cut 8 to 10 jobs. We would reduce the salaries of additional 5 to 7 administrative positions. 25% of our workforce is Native Hawaiian. There would be a $100,000 plus annual loss in the catering business from our catering vendor, a small family business. There would be a $40,000 annual loss for our mechanic, a Native Hawaiian owned family business. Considering the negative impacts of COVID, the 2018 eruptions, and other factors that made the past 4 years very difficult for tour operators like us, we would consider shutting down our business altogether. Now multiply this impact across the 7 other operators on the mountain. One of the great frustrations I continually hear from my childhood friends, family members, and others around me is that they feel they have little or no economic opportunity here. There are now as many Native Hawaiians living outside the state of Hawaii as there are inside the state of Hawaii. According to HUD, Hawaii has the highest per capita homelessness rate in the nation, a plight that has disproportionately affected Native Hawaiians. You all know these statistics. Hawaii has reached an inflection point where Hawaiians can't afford to live in Hawaii anymore. And yet, here we are proposing a bill that would close more businesses and eliminate more good-paying jobs from the island. Hawaii is not Hawaii without Hawaiians. Rather than spending tens of millions of dollars creating new agencies to keep public spaces closed, let's focus our time, our money, and our energy making the state livable for our Kanaka and Kama'aina while we still can. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Appreciate your testimony. Members, with your indulgence, I was just informed that Benjamin Kudo, the University of Hawaii Vice Chair of the Board of Regents, wanted to add his testimony to the UH's testimony. So with your indulgence, Mr. Kudo, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair Tarnas and members of the committee. I wanted to make sure that someone from the Board of Regents actually showed up at this hearing because we take this very seriously and have for several years now. I stand behind the written testimony of the Board of Regents Chair, Randy Moore, which was submitted earlier, and the written and oral testimony provided by Greg Chun. We respectfully oppose the bill before you for the reasons stated in the testimony given so far. The university has taken the criticisms and concerns regarding our management of the mountain seriously. We have taken it to heart and committed a significant amount of time and resources over the last 3 or 4 years to address these concerns. And we have made substantial progress in improving that. One of the things that we did in 2020 and 2019 was to pass a board resolution which outlined the outstanding management items that had been cited by the Legislative Auditor's Office with regard to things that had not yet been done. And we have addressed and given timeframes to the administration to accomplish these tasks. And they have, to their credit, done so. And so we've made substantial progress in completing these management tasks, including a total reorganization of the management functions and entities that currently manage the mountain. That was passed in 2020. We have hired a new person to head up that new reorganization. We have made substantial progress in the cultural aspects of that were required by the CMP to us to provide more cultural education and training and sensitivity to not only our employees and the vendors, but also the tourists and other visitors to the mountain. We have started and made substantial progress in the decommissioning of the 2 telescopes. The CSO telescope will be decommissioned at the end of this year. And so we continue to take all of this very seriously. We take our responsibility to steward the mountain in a responsible and respectful way very seriously as well. And I just wanted to show up today to make sure that all of you know that the Board of Regents feel very, very concerned about the whole situation. And we are doing the best job that we can to pay a great deal of attention to the mountain and our responsibilities, not only under the lease, but to the people of Hawaii and the Native Hawaiian community as well. Thank you for this opportunity to make this statement.
Thank you very much, Regent Kudo. I appreciate you joining us today. And members, I refer you to the written testimony of the Chair of the Board of Regents, Randolph Moore, which is in your packet, written testimony. Thanks. Next, we go to Rob Pacheco. Please proceed.
Well, yeah. Aloha, chairs and committee members. Thank you for having this hearing on a Saturday. It's very helpful. My name is Rob Pacheco, and I've had a 30-plus year relationship, personal relationship with Mauna Kea as a naturalist, as a bird watcher, as an interpretive guide. My company, Hawaii Forest and Trail, is one of the 8 permitted tour operators on the mountain. And I also served as the founding chair of the Mauna Kea Management Board upon its inception in 2000. And then I also served 2 terms on the Board of Land and Natural Resources. So I've had a really broad, varied relationship with the mountain and seen it from all different angles. So today I'm really testifying as, you know, from a personal perspective of looking at this bill. And I am in opposition of the bill in concept. I don't think creating a new bureaucracy is the best way forward for the mountain, and that it's the best for the mountain, our island community. I have seen a great amount of change of management on the mountain over these past, especially 25 years that we've been on the mountain as a commercial operator. And things are still not perfect. There's still a lot of issues. A lot of them are about capacity and enforcement and management. But the changes that have happened have been tremendous. And I won't go into detail though, but I stand by the university's testimony in that regard. I don't want to debate the merits of that though, whether, you know, new entity or whatnot. I would like to address 2 issues within the bill as it's written. The first one is about the jurisdiction, taking the lands up from 6,500 feet. And while I applaud, I think, you know, the idea of bringing all these lands under one management regime in some ways makes a lot of sense. You know, as a previous land board member, I look at the complexities of whatever legal, you know, mechanisms that will be needed to do these transfers, whether through executive orders, you know, the questions of what happens to the NARS area, all the on the ground management that happens there constantly. It's incredible terrain, and to manage it is very, very difficult. Just the logistical, the bureaucratic, administrative, and financial challenges of making this transfer, I think, cannot be underestimated. It's a very difficult process, and just to get mind around. I mean, I was involved in several executive orders on the land, my term on the land board, and all of those were much simpler and straightforward than what would be needed here. And every one of those took years to accomplish. And one, in fact, was accomplished while I was in term in 2014, I think, or something like that. And it still hasn't been consummated. So just to give you an idea how that works. My next issue I want to talk about, you know, speaks directly to impacting our company, but even more than that, you know, whether, and that has to do with the commercial activity, the access. The language says shall prohibit commercial activity. And I think their discussion, you know, there's a lot of the conversation around access to the mountain is something that's very important and very divisive. And so I think as long as public recreational access to the mountain is allowed, commercial activity should be allowed. It provides a relief valve for that kind of use going up, and the right equipment to get up the mountain, which is, you know, our vehicles, all the vehicles at the commercial tour operators are north of $100,000 a piece. And you need about 2 vehicles per 1 vehicle to be operating on that mountain because of the severity of the mountain and what it does to vehicles. And so we've been an important part of transporting, not just tourists up there, but with community groups supporting the Kama'aina program. But also we managed, we provide a management eye on the mountain while we're there, working with the rangers. And the people who are with us are very, very well managed, and they're getting an interpretive experience on the mountain instead of just driving up there on their own. And I know there's been discussion that possibly and maybe probably at some point private cars won't be allowed on the mountain. In that case, if they're going to be allowing some kind of activity in the mountain, there'll be some kind of shuttle service. And is the government going to run a shuttle service, or the entity, the authority, or are they going to contract that out? And if they are contracting out, that's a commercial use. So if this bill moves forward, I really strongly suggest that instead of saying shall prohibit commercial activity, change shall to may, so that you don't, in short-sightedness, close off that opportunity. Because we've generated the user fees from the tour companies over the last decade are in the millions of dollars, and they've supported the ranger program, baseline scientific monitoring, cultural monitoring, all sorts of good things on the mountain. The operation of the Visitor Information Center, of all our dollars are going directly to support that. And if the authority is created, they have a monumental task ahead of them, and something that I know the legislature every year is to pony up the money or find the monies to do all this stuff. You're going to need all the help you can, and to close off the possibility of using the right kind of commercial activity to generate revenues on the mountain to support those tasks is very short-sighted. So in closing, I am in opposition, and at the very least, though, please change that language that prohibits commercial activity, by statute. Leave that open so that a decision by whatever entities there in the future can make that decision down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pacheco. Next, we have Mr. Thane Curry.
Yes.
Who's indicated he was to be here today. Yes, please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm testifying in my personal capacity. I've gone to Mauna Kea since 2006. So I've seen the management of Mauna Kea up close and personal on multiple levels. This is a fatally flawed bill that will result in poor management of Mauna Kea, not better, and will get struck down by the courts if a legal challenge proceeds. The main problem I have with the bill is that the motivation is to have a new management structure that, quote, collaboratively engages with all stakeholders. Astronomy on Mauna Kea is a valuable resource for the state, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue per year. Mauna Kea is the best site for astronomy in the Northern Hemisphere. It is a blindingly obvious stakeholder, and so it is inappropriate, in my personal opinion, for astronomy, either directly or through REACH, to not have strong, well-represented voices, emphasis on the plural, in management on Mauna Kea, not just simply being an advisory group, period. The bill's reckless as it puts astronomy on Mauna Kea at serious risk. The UH is currently seeking a master lease renewal for Mauna Kea that expires in 2033. This is a very arduous process. I do not believe that there can be a new management authority put in place that could gain a lease renewal in time. At the very least, if there is a change in management, the current operation for observatory should continue past 2033. The bill inappropriately expands jurisdiction. Now, this was mentioned before, extending jurisdiction down to the 6,500 foot level along the Saddle Road Junction. Now, this has a patchwork of zoning designations: conservation district, restricted subzone, agricultural lands, DHHL lands, lands relevant for DLNR. It makes no logical sense as a solution to problems supposedly restricted to just the upper 10,000 acres to expand jurisdiction. This new management structure would make proper management of Mauna Kea vastly more challenging than before, not easier. This is a disaster in the making. The bill is blatantly unconstitutional, and if subjected to a legal challenge, will get struck down by the courts. There's a clear legal precedent for this for Rice versus Cayetano 2000, Arakaki versus State of Hawaii, following that prohibits race-based decision-making power. Regardless of whether or not we think that may be a good idea, the legal precedents before us preclude that. So what will the state do once this management structure gets struck down by the courts for being unconstitutional? Revert to the old structure? have no managing authority on Mauna Kea. This is reckless. And finally, I distinctly remember receiving a letter from Chair Nakashima several years ago when Kai Kahele put forth a bill to change the management authority, where he said the management of Mauna Kea from UH is good now. There's no reason to change it. I don't see what has changed. The entire premise of this management structure is flawed. As the recent auditor's report said, Mauna Kea is some of the best managed lands in the entire state. There is no justification for removing a good manager of state lands. I do agree that there is the criticism of UH for the lack of community outreach and engagement with the Hawaiian community. This is fair, but this can be addressed through other alternatives, not creating an entirely new structure. Certainly not one that cuts UH out entirely, puts astronomy itself at risk, and puts forth a management structure that is unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Next, we have Leimomi Khan, who has indicated she would provide testimony. Leimomi Khan. She was indicating she was giving testimony in support.
Yes, aloha.
Yes, please proceed.
Yes, I'm sorry, Chair Tarnas. I'm just having a little challenges here, but I should be.
You're fine. We hear you and see you, so please proceed.
Yes, thank you so much. All committee chairs, mahalo for hearing this bill today. I did provide written testimony, and I will just highlight a few points. First of all, I would ask that the committee consider amending Section -3 on the nomination process, nominating committee, Office of Hawaiian Affairs. That's the title of that section. I wish to recommend that the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs, the Moku o Keawe Hawaii Council, be added to the list of the organizations involved in vetting the nominees to serve on the Mauna Kea authority group that's being proposed. And my rationale for that is the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs is over 100 years old. I think most of you know this, and most of you know that it's a grassroots community-based advocacy group. We have a council on Hawaii Island. They are known as Moku o Keawe. And over approximately 25 years, the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs has adopted various resolutions concerning the protection and preservation of the cultural, religious, and environmental resources of Mauna Kea, and also in addressing the management of Mauna Kea. So I strongly urge that you add a representative of that group to this section. I also support the amendments proposed by Dr. Noinoe Wong Wilson in her written testimony. Lastly, I think we will all agree that this bill proposes a significant change in the management of Mauna Kea, has immense impact on the community, especially Hawaiian Island, but it also gives hope that cultural and island values will prevail, will be given greater consideration than economic benefits, albeit we all recognize a need to contribute to the economy of Hawaii Island, its people, and its businesses. As all committees to which this bill was referred are holding a joint meeting today, I am concerned about the opportunity for us to provide additional comments for consideration before any bill is adopted. And I'm so sorry. Perhaps, Chair Tarnas, you might comment on that, on what our opportunity might be after today's hearing. Because following legislative process, normally after all committees meet and they pass it out of committee, it then goes for a vote by the whole. So I'm really concerned about that. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify. I think I forgot to mention that I am in strong support of this bill. Mahalo, aloha.
Mahalo, Leimomi Khan. I would also refer members to her written testimony as well. Next, we have Sam King. who has indicated he'd like to provide oral testimony. Sam King.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas. Thank
Aloha,
you
please
for
proceed.
having me. Thanks for making the time to allow me to testify, especially last minute.
Yes.
I wanted to speak personally in my personal capacity. I submitted testimony on behalf of Imua TMT and the Ainoa Foundation, but I wanted to speak from my own perspective as a Native Hawaiian, born and raised in Hawaii. This bill has a lot of major issues. It's been raised by numerous testifiers. Fundamentally, the race-based concept of management is potentially unconstitutional. The religious violations are also potentially unconstitutional. And that's one I really wanted to touch on. 200 years ago, our ancestors abolished the Kapu religion. In the Ainoa, we declared that the Kapu religion would no longer have control over land use in Hawaii. Just to make sure, people talk about what is Hawaiian culture and what is the cultural practices that are happening. These are religious beliefs, which are beautiful and excellent, and they should be respected, but they are not superior to recreational or commercial uses of Mauna Kea. They are equal to those things. Our secular government promises us freedom of religion and freedom from religion. And this is something I think is being forgotten. And it's being paved over by using the term cultural. But you have to understand that religious beliefs are equal to recreational and commercial beliefs. And personally, as a Native Hawaiian, it's a violation of my human rights for people to say, oh, all Hawaiians believe in this religion, in this Kapu religion. All Hawaiians believe that the mountain is sacred. Some Hawaiians certainly do believe that, and I respect their right to believe it. However, we must also respect my right not to believe in it and other people's rights not to believe in it. Everybody's right to enjoy Mauna Kea should be respected, including being able to take a sled and go down on the snow. That is a fun activity, and fun is beautiful, and it's something that should be respected and loved. And the tours that go up there are awesome. I went on one of these tours. My wife knew how much I loved it. She took me out for my birthday to go see those telescopes. People talk about culture. This is another thing I want to touch on. There's always this debate about culture versus science, and it came out in TMT, and I'll say a bit on that in a second. The reality is that culture includes science and religion. All of this discussion is about science versus religion. It's not about science versus culture. Science is culture. Recreation is culture. Religion is culture. It was my culture to see those telescopes, to see Mauna Kea, to go up there and visit as someone who wanted to naked eye observe the stars and enjoy it. That is equal to the religious claims that are being made. Fundamentally, this bill is about the 30-meter telescope. I know everybody wants to talk about how it's not.
If I could ask you to summarize, please, that would be great.
Absolutely, I will. This is about this bill should not pass. In the end, the management of Mauna Kea is being done very, very well. And this is just going to create delay and obfuscation and chaos in the astronomy industry, which is what the protesters are trying to accomplish. But Rep. Tarnas, I commend you, sir, for your work on this commission, and I commend all of the members of the Mauna Kea Working Group. You guys did an amazing job. Mahalo nui loa to all of you. I know that was very tough work, and I have great respect for everybody that was on the committee and all the hard work you put into it. So, aloha, sir. I do oppose this bill, and I hope that we can work this out going forward. And mahalo to you for continuing the dialogue, sir.
Mahalo for your testimony, and members, I refer you to written testimony provided by Sam King and Imua TMT that's in your packet. I want to circle back to those individual testifiers who said they'd be here, but were not here when I called them. Is there anyone else with us today that is hoping to testify that wasn't here earlier? Anybody else? Seeing none.
I am Daviana.
Yes, Daviana McGregor. There you are. Welcome. Please proceed.
Okay, maybe can you turn that one off, please? Sorry, we have another computer on. I wanted to
really well. Turn that one off. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Aloha kākou, all the members of the various committees, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to testify. Sorry, I had a hard time navigating the location of where I could testify. I am testifying, I stand by my written testimony, which is to support very strongly House Bill 2024. And I commend the legislature for taking the initiative to pass the law, the resolution that led to the creation of the working group and the recommendations that and report that they came forward with, which resulted in the writing of this bill. And in addition to my testimony, I wanted to respond to some of what I've been hearing this morning. Issues of constitutionality. I would like to remind everyone that our state constitution, Article 12, Section 7 says that the state reaffirms and shall protect all rights customarily and traditionally exercised for subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes and possessed by Ahupua'a tenants who are descendants of Native Hawaiians who inhabited the Hawaiian Islands prior to 1778, subject to the right of the state to regulate such rights. So that is in our Constitution. It's our responsibility to protect our Native Hawaiian cultural subsistence and religious rights. I was also concerned that there seems to be concern about some precedent being set, but I would like to point out, I am a member of the Protect Kalawai Ohana. Here, Noah Emetaluli is with me, Dr. Luli, the founder of the Protect Kalawai Ohana. And we have a precedent in the recognition of land as being sacred and setting it aside from commercial use. And that is in the island of Kaho'olawe, Hawaii Revised Statutes, Section 6K, and that law sets aside Kaho'olawe for the kinds of rights that are enumerated in the Constitution. So the island is set aside for the exercise of Native Hawaiian subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes, and does prohibit commercial uses of the island. And it does also provide for the Board of Land and Natural Resources to hold the land in the island in trust for eventual transfer to a sovereign Hawaiian entity. So there is precedent for this to be done, and I believe that the working group did base their recommendation upon the Hawaii Revised Statute 6K. I'd like to also point out that the Hawaii Revised Statute 6K sets up the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission, which functions as an entity for co-management of the island with the Board of Land and Natural Resources. So the commission manages the island of Kaho'olawe on behalf of the Board of Land and Natural Resources, which I think is the language that the Attorney General was suggesting in their testimony. And the commission is comprised of members, a representative of the Protect Kalawai Ohana, 2 members nominated by the Protect Kalawai Ohana, someone representative of Native Hawaiian organizations, such as the civic clubs who have served, and then the Office of Hawaiian Affairs representative, and the chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources, and then someone appointed by the County of Maui. So it's this kind of setting up of a sole authority to work in consonance with the Board of Land and Natural Resources has precedent and has been functioning very effectively. The Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission was established in 1994. And it has been quite effective in providing for co-management and input from Native Hawaiian, as well as general public concerns through the counties and the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Finally, I'd like to just say that in my testimony, I support the amendments that were suggested by Noe Wong Wilson, and which was articulated by Dr. Kanahele about including the Kanawai in reference to the Kanawai, also referring to Mauna Kea as Mauna Awa Kea. But in the Protect Kalawai Ohana, we have always worked side by side with the Edith Kanakaole Foundation, beginning with Auntie Edith Kanakaole herself, who who gave us the mandate to and the guidance that we should work as an ohana, not an association, but as an extended family for Kaho'olawe. And we have continued to work with the Ida Kanakaole Foundation very effectively in knowing how to steward the lands, following the kanawai of our kupuna, and recognizing the sacredness of land in Kaho'olawe and recognizing our akua. And the Kanakaole has been very effective in guiding us and leading the protocols that finally brought an end to the bombing of Kaho'olawe and a transfer back to the state of Hawaii so that the island could be healed. And so I do again want to emphasize myself, and Dr. Luli, who's here too, want to emphasize our support of this bill and thank the legislature for, again, laying the groundwork for this bill to be created and hopefully to be passed. Mahalo nui loa.
Mahalo, Daviana McGregor and Dr. Emmett Aluli. Thank you very much for being with us today. Are there any other individuals with us in the Zoom room that had indicated they were wanting to provide oral testimony but were unable to earlier? I don't see anyone at this time. So members, that's all the testimony that we received via oral testimony. And I refer you to the packet of written testimony that we received, substantial numbers, both in support and in opposition to this measure. So I would urge you to review those carefully as we move forward in considering this measure. So that being all the testimony that we've received, I'd like to move forward into questions. If I may, I'd like to first ask those members of the Water and Land Committee first if they have questions, then I'll turn it over to Chair Nakashima to ask members of Judiciary if they have questions, and then to Chair Luke for questions from Finance Committee members. So members of the Water and Land Committee, do you have any questions for our testifiers today? Chair, yes, Representative Kobayashi.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask, let's see, DLNR, University of Hawaii, and Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Is a compromise possible that would bridge the divergent views presented today? My concern is that this bill might not go far, particularly given the opposition of two principal departments, DLNR and University of Hawaii, and that it is in danger of veto. Any comment?
Go to Chair Case first.
Whomever.
Certainly we remain open to all kinds of discussion on ways to better manage Mauna Kea. I think to the extent that this sets up a dichotomy of astronomy or not, that's a pretty tough line. And so I wouldn't presume to be able to project whether there's compromise there. I mean, the permit conditions do require a diminished footprint on, and the university is working very hard on moving that forward. The permit conditions require better cultural communication and education and outreach, and the university is working very hard on that. So certainly there's areas that we can all work better together on, and we remain committed to that. Thank you.
May I ask the university spokesperson, perhaps Greg Chun, to respond?
Sure, thank you. Representative Kobayashi, I understand your question to be whether compromise in governance in this case is possible. And to that, I would say, yes, the university is very open to that. In November of 2019, the regents directed the university administration to conduct its own analysis of alternative governance structures. We completed that in April of 2020, and all of that is public record on our regent's website. We identified several different opportunities for alternative governance, including what is being proposed here in HB 2024, an attached state agency. What we have chosen to do is to look at how we can improve representation, broaden representation on our own governance structure that has already been established. In December of 2021, the Mauna Kea Management Board, which is one of 3 community advisory groups that we have established and help us with providing community input into management issues, passed a resolution or passed a motion requesting or recommending to UH administration that we restructure the board itself. So we are in the process right now of expanding membership as well as seeking broader representation initially with state agencies, including DLNR, DHHL, OHA, and the County of Hawaii. That process is ongoing, but it's something that we are committed to as one way of seeking broader representation across stakeholder groups, including the Native Hawaiian community. Part of that restructuring will probably also involve an actual sort of rethinking of the current community-based structure or community membership, how community membership is represented. I can tell you that in addition to Mauna Kea Management Board, our other 2 advisory committees, Kahukumauna, our Cultural Advisory Committee, as well as our Environment Committee, both this past year have engaged in adding members and broadening their representation. And we do have members on both those committees who do not necessarily support TMT. So we are open, and we have a desire to hear from as many viewpoints as possible and involve folks from different stakeholder groups in our formal advisory capacities.
May I ask Office of Hawaiian Affairs to respond as well? Dr. Hussey?
Thank you, Representative, for that question. I think our testimony and comments in alignment with considering a collaborative stewardship model with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs speaks to that alignment and for those comments. I will say, though, ultimately, our Board of Trustees has the final decision as to any decisions out of any kind of collaborative work, but I believe our testimony is aligned to that collaborative effort that we are suggesting.
Mahalo. Any further questions? Representative Kobayashi. Thank you. Other questions from members of the Water and Land Committee? Seeing none, may I ask Chair Nakashima if you want to. Oh, wait, no, I do have, I'm sorry. I have a question from Vice Chair Branco, if I may. Please proceed, Vice Chair Branco.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the Deputy Attorney General.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I was just wondering, I was going through the bill and I noticed there was no definition for Native Hawaiian. Do you feel that it would be necessary to define what is a Native Hawaiian or a Native Hawaiian individual?
I think that the way that it's used, there's a generally accepted definition, and that it's anyone of Hawaiian ancestry. If there was a different definition that wanted to be used in connection with that requirement, then it should be put in the bill, yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deputy Attorney General.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other members of Water and Land Committee? Seeing no other questions from Water and Land Committee members for this first round, let me turn it to Chair Nakashima to check with your judiciary members.
Hey, members of the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, any questions? Okay, well, seeing none, I do have a question for Greg. I was wondering, the main thrust of the House resolution was the fact that Native Hawaiian voices were not being heard. And I know you kind of outlined a little bit how the university is trying to address that. I was wondering, in the House proposal, we are putting Native Hawaiians directly on the decision-making board to try and address that issue. I'm wondering how effectively you felt the university's efforts are in this regard.
If I interpret your question correctly, you're asking how effectively I believe our outreach to the Native Hawaiian community is? Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I think there's room for improvement, and there's no doubt for that. I will say, it's not unique to the university in this particular case. I will say that since 2015, with the protests around TMT specifically, and then sort of the protracted nature of that ongoing conflict, it has become increasingly more difficult to engage with Native Hawaiian community because our efforts are oftentimes just ignored. But we continue to make those efforts. And that's why what we've done is in part is to refocus our efforts on strengthening our internal advisory structure that's already in place. The Mauna Kea Management Board, Kahukumana, and our Environment Committee. The other thing I would say that we're excited about is, as some of you know, we recently went through an internal restructuring of our own UH management functions. Previously, we had different groups responsible for different parts of UH management that reported to different units within the system. Now all of those units are combined into what we now call the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship, reporting to the University of Hawaii, Hilo. And one of the key partners and collaborators, part of our leadership team, is the Imiloa Astronomy Center. And they have taken the lead on our education and not all of our outreach activities, but some of our outreach activities. So that brings us sort of another mechanism to engage with Native Hawaiian community on different things, not necessarily around TMT or development or astronomy on Mauna Kea, but how can we take the benefits of the work being done on Mauna Kea and share it with a broader segment of the community, including Native Hawaiians. So we're really excited about some of the programs that are starting to be conceived and some of the improvements that Imiloa is helping us make with some of our general education and outreach efforts.
Thank you very much. Members of Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, anyone else have a question?
Not Committee on Finance, any members from the Committee on Finance, any questions?
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Representative Martin, go ahead.
This is a question for DLNR. I understand that you oppose this bill and are currently stewards of a lot of the land and have ongoing projects there. If this bill goes forward, I wanted to ask what would your relationship be or role be in continuing the ongoing stewardship, in continuing ongoing projects that you have there? How could that work? Should the bill go forward? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. As I understand it, this bill proposes to take over management for everything on Mauna Kea from the 6,500 foot level, which is down at the Saddle Road level. So I don't know what it would do to, for instance, the Mauna Kea Ice Age Natural Area Reserve, the hunting areas that DLNR manages on the mountain, the endangered species work that we manage on the mountain, invasive species control, historic and cultural resources. I mean, it seems to take all of the management in a different direction. It is a huge responsibility. Complex trails, fire control, all of those. Yeah, I'm not clear how those responsibilities would be taken up.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Members? Chair Tarnas, Finance Committee has no other questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Back to the Water and Land Committee, second round. Any questions from members?
Chair?
Vice Chair Branco, please proceed.
For Dr. Chun, please.
Sure.
Dr. Chun, thank you for being here. I was going through your testimony and one sentence stood out to me. The university has acknowledged and apologized for its stewardship of Mauna Kea prior to 2000. And I was just hoping you could expand on that and what was acknowledged and what was apologized for.
President Lasner and then Chancellor Don Straney from Hilo publicly acknowledged that stewardship prior to, especially to leading up to the 1998 audit and then until 2000 when the new master plan or the existing master plan, then existing master plan was implemented, was not what it should have been. I mean, there was clearly a lack of ongoing enforcement, if you will, of making sure the Mauna was facilities were disposing of material correctly and just a variety of different things. So that acknowledgement, and I've heard President Lasner make that acknowledgement several times publicly in other contexts as well. So that's what that's I'm referring to.
Thank you, sir. Chair, if I may ask another question. Okay. With Dr. Chun again. We allotted monies for some decommissioning of telescopes last year. If you could talk to me about how many telescopes are in total are up there, how many are ready to be decommissioned, and what is that decommissioning process? Is that taking a telescope completely back to where the land is completely refurbished back to where it is? If you could kind of talk about that process with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there are currently 13 astronomy sites. Two facilities are going through decommissioning. One is the Caltech submillimeter observatory, which you probably have heard about recently in the news. They have secured their conservation district use permit from the DLNR and had their EIS accepted for that work. And so now they are proceeding with preparing to procure contractors and start the work this summer. The other telescope is the Hilo Hokukea teaching telescope, which is the facility you folks, thank you, allocated funds for its decommissioning. That facility is going through its permitting, environmental due diligence and permitting process now. We expect that to be completed in 2023 and the decommissioning to be completed in 2024, although we are looking at ways to accelerate that process. One of the challenges with decommissioning is to decommission a facility requires all of the same steps and processes and permits as required to build a new facility. And so that is a multi-year process. In addition to that, in addition to the permits that they're required to get from DLNR, we have our own decommissioning plan that they must follow. So they actually have to comply, the facility, decommissioning facility has to comply with our own decommissioning plan before it even gets to the point of going to DLNR. And that decommissioning plan is very specific and whatnot. These are the first two that have gone through the process. So we're trying to learn as we go. We think that there's some opportunities for improving that process. But it is a multi-year process. It can take, it can take 5 years itself.
Thank you, sir.
If there's no other questions from Water and Land members, I have a question, one for university, one for DLNR. Dr. Chun, in your testimony from the university, you note that the annual operating costs for stewardship alone are $12 million, the majority of which is covered by extramural and non-general funds generated by the university. Could you explain that? Where are these funds coming from? And what other costs are the university bearing in addition to the stewardship costs of $12 million annually for management of your leased lands?
So the funds collectively involved in stewardship, which includes in the education and outreach component of the institute, the IMI law, come from state general funds, university tuition and special funds. The observatories themselves pay a big chunk of the maintenance and facility and operational costs of the mid-level facilities at Halepohaku. So that includes the road maintenance that provides public access, not just observatory access. And then the Mauna Kea Special Lands Fund. So those funds, that account right now, its primary source of revenue is from TMT rent and commercial tour operating costs.
So you're saying that some of the 12 million is actually from general funds as well?
Yes,
not,
yes.
Okay. That would be useful for us. Chancellor Irwin did provide us some of that information in the Mauna Kea working group, but we'd like to really drill down and get more details on the actual costs that are incurred by the university in your work so that we can fully understand what the costs are. I'd appreciate that if you could follow up.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the same question to the land board chair, what kind of costs does the department incur for all of the resource management that the department does on the lands above Saddle Road that is being contemplated in this bill to come under this new entity? Would you be able to provide us with that information? Perhaps not at your fingertips now, but we would like to get that detail.
Yeah, we can try to come up with an estimate. It's not broken out. It's embedded in the capacities of all of our divisions, the land division and the Office of Conservation and Coastal Land, which is funded by the Special Land and Development Fund, which is made up of revenues from state leased properties. And then we have DoCare that responds on the mountain. That's general funded generally. Same with Historic Preservation, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. Those are general fund allocations that are embedded in the budget.
I appreciate it's not disaggregated just for this area, but again, we're trying to get a handle on what are the costs that are being expended. What are the resources being expended by the department to manage these important resources on Mauna Kea? And I have to acknowledge First Deputy Bob Masuda did participate in the Mauna Kea working group. He did his best to provide financial data as well as other resource data to us. But again, we're trying to get the detail just to really understand how much it does require to manage these important resources. So thank you.
We'll try to estimate that for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Members of Water and Land, second time around, Representative Kobayashi.
Hello. I have a question for Attorney General. Does this bill have a constitutional issue, either particularly relating to race, not race or religion, but particularly race?
Okay, so I don't believe that there is a religion based issue, constitutional issue in this bill. As far as race, there are other laws within that have been passed that have similar race-based provisions in it that have not been struck down by courts. And if we can't say that it's unconstitutional, because only a court can determine whether or not a law is unconstitutional. It may be subject to claims in court claims that it is unconstitutional, and those may be upheld by the court. There are provisions in the state constitution that allows for special treatment of Native Hawaiian rights and traditional and customary practices. But there is a question as to whether or not it would be violative of the U.S. Constitution, and whether or not it could be subject to a lawsuit based on that.
Is there can you suggest any possibilities that would lessen the likelihood that claims of unconstitutionality would be, shall we say, averted or lessened?
So I think a lot of the claims would come with regards to the makeup of the advisory committee or the managing committee, where they're required to be Native Hawaiian, and what other statutes, existing statutes do, rather than making it based on the person's ancestry, they make it based on their knowledge of the Native Hawaiian culture. So if it's based on their knowledge, then it doesn't require that they be of a certain race, but it could still fulfill the same purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Kobayashi. Any other questions second time around for the Water and Land Committee members?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead, Vice Chair Branco.
For Dr. Chun, please. Dr. Chun, there's a lot of conversations in the legislature about economic diversification and looking for industries where Hawaii has a particular competitive advantage in. Astronomy is one of those. If you could kind of give 30-foot level of the economic impact that astronomy has to Hawaii, please, that would be appreciated.
Sure, thank you for the question. As you folks probably are aware, our University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization, UHERO, released the first part of an update to a study we did back in 2014 on the economic impact of astronomy in Hawaii. The updated numbers show about $110 million of direct spending by astronomy and astronomy-related or supported industries or businesses into the economy, and with I think it was $221 million impact statewide. Most of that is on Hawaii Island itself, which would make a lot of sense. I think the value, the economic value, is clearly stated in the report. But what we're doing now is to supplement the report, is that we're trying to tease out sort of how astronomy contributes to the community in other ways as well, both economically through tertiary impacts that might be occurring, as well as through education and other impacts. Just as an example, I mean, the observatories themselves contribute, I think it's probably $1.5 million a year just to, or it might be more than that, to education and outreach. And it's really hard to quantify sort of the impact of of some of those programs that they've implemented. You know, you really don't understand sort of the impact of some of that educational impact unless you're in the room with a young student who has, for example, been awarded time to observe on one of the observatory's telescopes, and to see their eyes open up and to really find something for themselves. So astronomy does have a broad impact. What we're also trying to do is understand where it fits within the overall, what I would call research and technology sector within the state. That I know is something that we are interested in developing as well. So we'll have a better understanding of some of those secondary and tertiary impacts when the second part of the report is done later this spring.
Thank you, sir. Chair, if I may ask another question?
Yes, please proceed.
To DLNR Director, please. Chair Case, as you know, we work together on many different issues and we respect the work of the department. Reading your testimony, a phrase that stood out to me is, there's already a strong management framework. That stood out to me. However, many felt that Mauna Kea was not being properly taken care of. It motivated thousands of Hawaiians, even non-Hawaiians, to come out and said that the job wasn't being done. So how do you respond that there was such a large movement and many say that the work isn't being done? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, again, if you break down, you know, management reviews, there are a lot of people that will say in the early decades there wasn't good management. The 1998 audit pointed out a number of serious flaws, I guess, and those have been addressed over the years to the point where if you look at the recent audits, there's really very little left in terms of audit findings. The last one that really pointed out the need to do for the university to do rules to manage access to the mountain, and now they've done that. Certainly, the university has done just a tremendous job in managing, you know, again, trash and invasive species enforcement, public safety, and so I mean, I do think that people use the term management as a substitute for whether they do or don't like TMT or sometimes more broadly astronomy. And so that's a question of, you know, policy decisions that the state has committed to for many years that have, as you just heard, huge economic ramifications. So I mean, from my perspective, you know, we do have a report every year, usually in January, to the land board, a report by the university on progress in the management plan. There's actually very little public interest in those. That it's kind of I've always find it kind of surprising that there's so much comments about management on the mountain, and these reports, there's very little public participation or testimony. So that's why I think that people are using the term differently and calling the disagreements about management when it really has to do more with what uses do you want to see on the mountain, and people, you know, have different opinions about that.
Thank you. Chair, if I may, my last question.
Yes, please proceed.
To Mr. Azama, please, Bronson Azama.
Aloha, sorry, still here.
Oh. No, many in our community, and us Kanaka, believe that, you know, Mauna Kea is more, right? It's a manifestation of all the injustices that have happened to our people over the years. But you as a young, you know, being on the youth commission, being a young civic leader, I just wanted to ask the question, what does Mauna Kea represent to you?
For me, it does tie into all of those intergenerational traumas, because I mean, if we were in the older times of our kupuna, a lot of the issues that have happened wouldn't have happened now. So it is a representation of that. But to me, more importantly, it's family. Our relationality to place informs the relationality we share amongst each other. And the ongoing desecration has represented the loss of relationality we have shared amongst each other. Our Aina teaches us the importance of the need to find sort of, I guess, in a way where everybody's able to heal and work cohesively together. And we've lost that sort of cohesion, and we've lost that relationality to be able to have these dialogues that really uplift everyone. And, you know, it's even found in the relationship that Aina has with itself now, as, you know, so many things have been introduced that have caused a great deal of detriment to our spaces and places. But most importantly to me, it's family and the understanding of the need to really go back to that universe, not universe, but that mindset of one of accounting to one of accountability, accountability to not only the family that's present now, but for the family that will feed, that it will feed for future generations. So for me, it's all about continuity and ohana.
Mahalo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions from members of the Water and Land Committee? Okay, that's it from Water Land. Let me turn it over to Chair Nakashima for a second round for the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee. Questions?
Okay, members, Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, are there any questions?
I have a question, Chair, if you don't mind.
Representative McKelvey.
Yes, I just wanted somebody, I don't know who the right party would be, to touch upon the point that was brought up a couple of times insofar as that the area, well, there's actually two questions. The first one is that managerial areas go all the way down to Saddle Road, and that could affect current agricultural farming entities, as well as DHHL opportunities to provide housing for the beneficiaries on their list. Anybody care to weigh in on that? So far as the geographic boundaries of this committee's jurisdiction and what potential issues may arise because of it?
Let me, Representative McKelvey, the working group went to the 6,500 foot level, which is the Saddle Road level. And they felt that they wanted all of the Mauna incorporated, the upper side slopes of the Mauna incorporated. And it does encroach on some DLNR land at the lower levels, as well as two private entities. However, with the private entities, the discussion was that you know, the new entity would have to develop the working relationship with those entities to see if anything would be done with the private lands, and also they would have to negotiate with DLNR for DLNR lands, because we weren't automatically going to move those over to their jurisdiction.
Okay.
Chair, you were talking about DHHL lands.
Yes. What did I say?
You said DLNR, but in fact,
DLNR, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
DLNR land.
No, thank you for that clarification and that background, Chair. I appreciate it. And one other final question, I guess it's to OHA, if they're still around. I guess I'll just throw it out there. This entity is the, single entity that has the sole authority. What if in the future the entity makes a decision or a ruling that the trustees of OHA feel is not in conflict with them in their position? I mean, is there any appeal mechanism or due process mechanism that an entity or like OHA or others with Native Hawaiian groups would have if they don't agree with the future ruling or condition that's made by this group?
Thanks for that question, Representative. I think like anything, it's never an easy question. There's certainly constitutional issues, and that's what complicates it as well. Ultimately, it would be the Board of Trustees to determine the constitutionality of it, to determine their role and their responsibility as established in Constitution. So lots of those questions would be a part of any kind of consideration when and if things move forward in the next steps. The short answer is it's complex and would have to be under tremendous amount of study by the trustees to formulate a response.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your response. And I hope this is an area that as the bill moves forward, can be examined closely. Thanks again, though. I appreciate your feedback. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative McKelvey. Any other questions from Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs? Hey, sensing none, Representative Luke.
Thank you. Thank you for Finance Committee. We have questions from Representative Todd, followed by Representative Eli, and then Representative Peruso. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I guess my first question would probably be for the Attorney General's office. So the bill specifies a return to the natural state at the summit, or actually above 9,000 some odd feet elevation. I was wondering if you could clarify what that means. And more specifically, would that mean that we would actually be destroying the existing roads in addition to these structures and completely returning everything? That'd be my first question, I suppose.
So, because I don't think it's well defined in the bill itself, I think that'd be for the new management authority to define what it would mean by natural condition, whether or not that would require the removal of all infrastructure, including the roads, or whether or not it would they would leave some infrastructure in place to allow better access to people who need to be up there.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my second question would probably be, I'd imagine for DLNR and possibly the university. So I was wondering if there's any sort of cost projection for what something like that would entail. Like as an example, on the DLNR side, we've been dealing with Uncle Billy's Hotel, and this is a relatively small structure with a small footprint that's in town. So it wouldn't require the massive trucking operation to actually go up and down and all that travel. And my understanding is the demolition and disposal of that structure was projected to cost over $6 million. So I'm wondering if there's a current cost projection for the complete decommissioning of all astronomy on Mauna Kea, and then maybe broader what that return to natural state would actually cost us. And also under the current provisions in the bill, who would be responsible for paying for that? Thank you.
Yeah, the university might be better to answer that question since they're working right now on decommissioning 2 telescopes.
Sure. We don't have a total cost for what it would cost to decommission or remove all of the current the facilities. Those are all those costs are dependent on the size and sort of how some of those buildings were built. In regards to the other infrastructure like roadways and communications, we have done estimates on repair work on parts of the Summit Road that would be required in probably the next 5 to 8 years. And I don't have that study in front of me, but I recall that number to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $19 or $20 million. Now that's just repair. I would imagine that complete removal of all of that infrastructure, including what it would cost to remove all of the telescopes, would be quite a lot more significant.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I know you did talk in broader terms about the economic impact of the industry. Is there, I know that in economics, you can kind of equate that spend to jobs created. Do you have a figure for that?
Yeah, there is I don't have it in front of me, but we'll get it to you in the analysis that Yuhiro just completed. There's some job numbers in there as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Todd. Next up is Representative Eli.
Mahalo, Chair. I have a question for Greg Chun and Dr. Wilson. It's pretty much the same question. So in the report, there is a request to return the MONA to its natural state, but it doesn't indicate a timeline. So my question is first for the University of Hawaii, what is the university's plan or timeline to do that? And my question to Dr. Wilson is the intent of the report as far as the timeline. So if you could both answer that question.
You want to go first, Noi?
Sure, thank you. Yes, mahalo, Representative Eli. So if I can speak on behalf of, as being one of the members of the working group, the intention here is to indicate to this entity that would be formed that there is a need for them to develop a planning scenario for the long term. And we purposely didn't put a timeline on there. What I believe we discussed was taking a look at such issues as the future of the astronomy field based on the state of technology. And, you know, we're all witness to the space-based operations now with the James Webb telescope. So how long is a big question, which has been asked before. How long is land-based astronomy going to be the best way for the science to proceed? And then secondly, the lifespan of the facilities that are up there. I don't believe it was the intention that when these facilities were first put up there, that they would constantly be remodeled or replaced so that they would be there for eternity. I never heard that as a scenario. So it's simply asking the entity to consider in their long range look that as a scenario based on technology, based on lifespan cycles. And then eventually what I hope Greg can address is the cost of returning all of that. So I also heard the question about whether that includes roads. You know, I don't think the committee intended to be that specific. It's up to the entity to consider all of those things. It was more about guidance. Thank you.
So I think Dr. Wilson hit on a key element here, and that is the state of the technology and how long is ground-based astronomy deemed to be viable. I think it's the astronomers that would be in a better position to answer that question. We've certainly asked that question of experts and have received I'll call them guesstimates, I think, more than anything, if anywhere from another 100 to 200 years, but they really don't know. They really don't know. So as you know, we believe astronomy on Mauna Kea has a continuing life, and that's why we're seeking a new master lease from the department. And I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime that, you know, from what I understand from the experts, that we would see a demise of ground-based astronomy. But I'm not really the expert on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give the other members a chance to ask their questions.
Thank you. Next up is Representative Peruso and then followed by Representative Martin.
Mahalo. My question is for the Attorney General. So we've been having conversations, is she on? There she is. We've been having conversations in another committee around SLDF and the practice that DLNR engages in, which is to retain all of the funds, all of the revenue from ceded lands, even after they give 20% to OHA as required by law. But then they retain the remainder. So in this case, because we're having conversations about the funding to provide for care of the Mauna, there's nothing to prevent DLNR to give more of those funds from that revenue back to the general fund, is there? There's nothing in law that would prevent them from doing that so that this authority could be fully funded.
Well, except that those funds are being used by DLNR to provide other services or to fulfill other purposes of the trust. And so reducing the amount of funding that they have available to do their other functions will decrease their ability to fulfill other purposes of the public trust, the public land trust. And so, you know, if that's how the legislature decided that they wanted the DLNR to use those funds, they would also have to identify other funds that would be needed to be provided to DLNR for them to be able to carry on their other functions that do serve the public land trust. For instance, Chair Case identified that the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands is funded through the SLDF. And so if all of those, the ceded lands revenues were removed from the SLDF, then other funding would have to be identified to allow functions like the OCCL to continue.
Just to clarify, because I think that we are saying the same thing, that those revenues could simply be directed towards the general funds to be appropriated to use to care for lands that previously DLNR used them to care for, if that makes sense. Which is basically, I'm asking if there's any legal prohibition against that. And I'm hearing you say that it's really up to the legislature.
Yes.
Thank you. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Next is Representative Martin.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for OHA, please. Just wanted to make sure she's with us. But my question is, I represent a Native Hawaiian homeland community in my district, and they have definitely gravitated around this issue as something that represents a return to Hawaiian stewardship of the land and a voice. And I would, as a representative, I would like to respect that and represent them. With the testimony, you know, in opposition from some Native Hawaiian groups, for by others, I'm getting a little bit confused now. And I noted in your testimony, you had recommended a collaborative stewardship rather than a single entity. But if this moves forward, do you think that that model, I guess, what is the better starting place? Going back to nothing, to the way it is right now by not moving this forward? Or do you think it's a better starting place for moving forward to establish the proposed Mauna Kea Stewardship Authority and work from that as a new starting place? Thank you.
Thanks, Representative, for that question. Similar to previous responses, right? It's complex. Our participation, we appreciated that we were included in the participation and the thinking of the governance. And we didn't, some of the discussion that we had, some of those thoughts weren't brought forward in the report, but we respect the process that was used to generate the report. Anything regarding, and the reason we say collaborative stewardship is we feel that there needs to be continuing discussion. The bill with its authority is super complex. It creates different mechanisms, funding sources, governance structures. And so there's still a lot more study that needs to be done on the unintentional potential consequences of implementing the governance model that we've heard today, from stakeholders. So I would say that we would be open, as our testimony has stated, to looking through what that collaborative model might look like, and easier said than done, to say collaborations when you get down into all of the details. But we would recommend to our trustees that we study that on administration and then provide them with a recommendation for their decision making.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, so do you think that the better starting point would be not passing this bill and staying where we are now to try again? Or do you think the better starting point would be to establish this group and have them work out? That be the starting point?
I think the assumption that we made in that is there already is a governance model. It may not be a governance model that people appreciate, it has its flaws. And so our response to that is the working group and looking at that model. We would say that we already have a governing model. And so that's why our comments are what they are. And we participated in there. So I guess the short answer is, we have no comment regarding either one. We recognize that there is a governance model, and we participate in taking and examining what an alternate governance model might be.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other finance members' questions? There seem to be none. So back to you, Chair Tarnas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the members of Water and Land Committee, Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee, and Finance Committee. I think we've made a couple of rounds of questions, and I don't see anyone else who wants to ask questions. So what I'd like to close out the discussion here. I think we all recognize the paramount importance of Mauna Kea and the very serious responsibility that we have to manage this public trust resource. I think we acknowledge the very strong opinions on all sides of this issue. And this debate is not over as to what is in the best management framework for Mauna Kea. Your testimony today was very helpful. It helped the committee members understand these complex issues better. I urge all committee members to review the written testimony you have in your packet. Because of the complexity of the issues here and the volume of testimony we have, with the concurrence of the other chairs, I propose to defer decision-making on this measure until Wednesday, February 23rd at 11 a.m. In conference room 430 and via video conference. We'll post notice after this hearing, so we'll let the public know. But decision-making on this bill will be on Wednesday, February 23 at 11 a.m. There's nothing more from me from Waterland. With your concurrence, Chair Luke and Chair Nakashima, I'd like to close out the hearing today. Is that okay with you? Okay, with their concurrence, no further business before the Joint Committee of Water and Land, Judiciary, Hawaiian Affairs, and Finance today. We've closed our business. Thank you very much to all testifiers. This meeting is adjourned.